Daniel Sports Central. We go for our next schedule preview of this offseason, and this could be for the South Carolina Gamecocks, a team that went 7-6 overall in the 2021 season. And this team definitely looks like a contender going into next season. You got Spencer Rattler coming in, Oklahoma transfer quarterback, plus a couple other transfers. And then, of course, you got some good return production as well going into next season. And this team definitely looks like a dark horse. So today, we'll be going over the players this team will be losing, who they'll be returning, and also looking at their schedule for the first time this offseason, starting out with some notable games from last season. This team 7-6 overall. Not a bad season for South Carolina. I mean, 7-6 is not a bad record. I mean, they made it to a bowl game, got a huge win over North Carolina in their bowl game. I mean, they beat them by 17, so that was certainly a good win there to finish out this season. Did lose to Georgia 13-40, lost to Kentucky by 6, low-scoring matchup there. Beat Florida 40-17. That was a huge win over the Gators, and of course, Florida last season was definitely a disappointment, but South Carolina, that was a good win for them there. Lost to Missouri by 3. That was a tough, close loss. Beat Auburn 21-17 on November 20th. So, I mean, you can see South Carolina, this team they had some good wins last season. I mean, they definitely had a lot of talent last year. And, I mean, this team, 7-6 overall, is definitely some improvement. I mean, this team is getting better. And going into next season now, I mean, you got Spencer Rattler coming in. That's, of course, the main storyline for this team, and rightfully so. I mean, he was a quarterback that was looking to be a potential Heisman contender going into 2021. Turns out he didn't really do quite as good as many had expected, but going to 2022, we've seen Spencer Rattler's potential. So, I mean, it's gonna be interesting to see how he does going into next season. First 6 games, this team was 3-3. Last 7, they were 4-3. Here's your roster preview. Luke Doty, your starting quarterback there from last season. Luke Doty, last season overall had a good season. I mean, you had a few quarterbacks last year that split time: Luke Doty, Jason Brown, and Zeb Nolan. But Luke Doty was the top one out of those 3. He put up nearly 1,000 yards of passing, 5 touchdowns, 3 picks. I mean, this team did not have a very defined, impressive quarterback last season. I mean, Jason Brown put up 700 yards, 8 touchdowns, 6 picks. And then Zeb Nolan, of course, 690 yards, 7 touchdowns, 1 pick. I mean, so overall, all 3 quarterbacks definitely show talent. But Spencer Rattler, it's pretty clear that he's going to be the favorite to win the starting position going into next season. He's clearly got the best ceiling, the highest ceiling, and he's just the best player overall right now. Running back position, you got Kevin Harris. He's going to be gone, so that's going to be a tough loss. Last season, he put up over 660 rushing yards, over 700 total, and 4 touchdowns. And then Zaquandre White, your second running back last season, put up over 700 yards of total offense and 5 touchdowns, is also not returning. So the backfield does have a couple of missing parts there. But the receiving core overall, I'd say, looks pretty good. Josh Vann, he's coming back, your top receiver from last season, put up over 700 yards of offense, 5 touchdowns. Jaheim Bell, your second wideout, also coming back going into next season. He put up over 500 yards and 5 touchdowns. And then, of course, your third in receiving tight end, Nick Muse, he is gone. So, I mean, offensively, you lose your top 2 running backs. You lose your tight end and third in receiving. You also lose 2 on the defensive line, 3 linebackers, 2 in the secondary. So, I mean, this defense is losing a decent amount of key starters last season. So, I mean, South Carolina does have a moderate amount of losses, but I feel like going into next season, this team definitely shows potential still, despite losing 7 of their starters on the defense. But Spencer Rattler, of course, that's a huge factor for this offense. Bringing him in, and in the right back position, if you can get 1 or 2 guys to step up and play well in that position, I mean, this offense looks good. And defensively, of course, you got some missing parts as well, but I think depth-wise, this team looks okay going into next season. I mean, how significant is having Spencer Rattler? I would say, I mean, this team, it's going to be a game changer. I feel like for South Carolina here, I mean, the quarterback position was kind of a mess last year, and so going into next season, having a defined starter, Spencer Rattler, who has shown his potential, he's got a very high ceiling. I mean, that's going to be huge for the Gamecocks, and chances of being a contender in 2022, I'd say are fairly good for South Carolina. I don't expect this team to win the SEC next year, but I mean, they potentially could cause some noise and I mean, maybe pull off a couple of big upsets next year, and I mean, maybe this team gets up to 8 or 9 wins. We'll see what happens. But looking at your transfer portal and recruiting now going into next season, of course, this team has been extremely active in the transfer portal. Besides Spencer Rattler, you got Austin Stogner, his tight end coming in. That's a huge get there, and that's going to help a lot in the tight end position. Reed, a safety, is coming in from Central Michigan. From James Madison, you got a receiver coming in, Wells. Linebacker is going to Coastal Carolina there, Jamar Brown. Dominic Hill's going to Temple, defensive back. You got Beal, a running back. You got Carroll, also a running back, coming in from two different places, Wake Forest and Georgia. So running back position does have a couple of transfers coming in, so that's going to help with the depth in that position. And then, of course, Colby Fields, linebackers, off to LSU. So this team, lots of changes through the transfer portal this offseason. That's only 8 of, I'd say, your most significant moves besides Spencer Rattler. Recruiting-wise, this team is 25th in the nation, 11th in the SEC. You got 3 4-stars coming in, and then 19 3-stars. So recruiting-wise, 25th is pretty good, but, I mean, the SEC has got so many teams in that top 25, it doesn't look very good in comparison to the conference. But, I mean, this team overall looks pretty good next season, I would say. Defensively, that's the main question mark, but otherwise, I mean, this team definitely shows potential. But that said, let's get to the schedule now. Going into next season, you got Georgia State to start off the season on the 3rd of September. Then you got Arkansas on the road, and then Georgia at home. So, I mean, you got 2 tough games there in the first 3 weeks. I mean, Georgia State, that's easy game, I would say there. But Arkansas, Georgia, both teams definitely like contenders in the conference. And then you got Charlotte, South Carolina State then to follow, both at home. You got Kentucky on the road, Texas A&M at home. You got Missouri at home, Vanderbilt on the road, Florida, Tennessee, and then Clemson to finish out the season. This is a tough schedule for South Carolina. I mean, that's kind of one of the factors that I am concerned about. You don't have to play Alabama, but you got to play Texas A&M, who's really, I mean, they're going to be a contender next year for sure. Tennessee, Florida, of course, division opponents there. Clemson on the road is one of your non-conference games, and I mean, otherwise your non-conference games aren't terribly difficult, but Clemson, of course, could be good, and that's also on the road. I mean, Tennessee, yeah, I mentioned them. Kentucky, Georgia, Arkansas. So, I mean, you got some tough games here, and that's definitely going to be concerning going into next season is how many tough games do you got. And, I mean, Arkansas in week 2 is going to be tough playing on the road there. But looking at the first half of the schedule, you're Georgia State. I'm going to say that's an easy win. I'm going to favor Arkansas and Georgia over the Gamecocks in their respective games. Georgia being at home, potentially South Carolina keeps it close, but I mean, Arkansas on the road, that's going to be tough there. That's a tough place to play, and Razorbacks could be good next season, I think, once again. Charlotte, South Carolina State, both easy wins. Kentucky on the road. The Wildcats could be good again next season. I think Kentucky and Arkansas are pretty comparable skill-wise going into next season, and I feel like Kentucky, they'll be good again, so I'll favor the Wildcats there. And looking at the second half of the schedule, still some tough games. Texas A&M, I'll favor the Aggies in that one. Missouri, close one, but I'll favor South Carolina there. Vanderbilt on the road, Florida on the road, Tennessee. I will favor South Carolina against Florida and Tennessee. That Florida game on the road definitely could be a huge one. And then Clemson on the road. That Clemson game is about as close as it gets. I mean, that's basically a 50-50, and I'm barely leaning towards Clemson there. But, I mean, yeah, South Carolina is very capable of winning that game against. Honestly, I mean, that may change once I come out with my official predictions where I predict every game one by one. I may just pick South Carolina to beat Clemson there. I mean, that game is pretty much a 50-50. But record projection, 6-6 to 10-2 for South Carolina. The range is pretty wide. I mean, this team is kind of tough to predict. I mean, this team is pretty inconsistent sometimes. And, I mean, Spencer Rattler coming in could have a huge factor, but also could do absolutely nothing. That's the thing. I mean, he definitely brings potential to this team, and it definitely raises the ceiling, I think, for South Carolina. But, I mean, still the floor is still pretty low at 6-6. But I do see this team making a bowl game no matter what. I'd be very surprised if they didn't. But that said, let me know your thoughts and comments below on South Carolina. And I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.